Hey, it's Sam from Sugar Spun Run, and today we are making a mint chocolate cake. We are not just making any mint chocolate cake, we are making a super decadent, super heavy, lots of sugar involved mint chocolate cake. I hope you're ready for this one. Get your oven preheating to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and let's start by making our cake layers. These are going to be some pretty hefty chocolate cake layers with a rich chocolate flavor. So you'll need a large mixing bowl, and in this we'll start by combining 2 2/3 cups of all-purpose flour. That is 330 grams, and I do include weight measurements in the description and in the printable recipe because weight measurements are what I actually use myself. So with all of my recipes, you'll find standard American cups and you'll find grams listed because I use grams. And trust me, everyone should use weights. If you're not doing it, best way to level up your baking. We're also going to be adding some granulated sugar. This is 2 cups of granulated sugar. But wait, there's more. We're also going to be adding some brown sugar. This is a cup of firmly packed light brown sugar. And if you're thinking, wow, that's a lot of sugar, it's because we're making a lot of cake. This is going to be a big one. It's going to be impressive. Just cut yourself a thin slice if you prefer. All right, now for the chocolate, we are going to be using cocoa powder. I'm using Dutch processed cocoa powder today. This is 1 cup plus 2 tablespoons, which is 112 grams for anyone weighing. And for our leavening agent, we'll be using 2 1/4 teaspoons of baking soda. And of course, we need salt. We will be adding 1 1/4 teaspoons of table salt to this recipe. And whisk everything together until it's well combined. Now you could absolutely make this recipe in your stand mixer if you prefer. I personally am just going to be doing it by hand today, but you could also use an electric hand mixer. Any of those will work just fine. Just make sure you have a large mixing bowl because like I said, this makes a lot of cake. Always want to check, make sure you got everything well mixed. There's our spatula here. I see some pockets of flour. All right, next up we're going to add our oil and butter, and this cake does use a blend of both. And if you've watched any of my other cake recipes, you know it's because I like to use the oil because it makes the cake super moist, especially if you're going to refrigerate it. But I also love to use butter for flavor. Butter really adds a nice flavor to your cake. So we'll add 1 cup of cooking oil, and you want to use a neutral cooking oil. I'm using avocado oil, but alternatively you could use canola oil or vegetable oil. For the butter, we're using 3/4 cup of unsalted butter, and I have melted this. And you know we don't waste butter around here. All right, now we're going to stir everything together until all of your dry ingredients are moistened and the butter and oil have been completely absorbed. It's a lot of batter, so it can become a little bit of an arm workout, which is where your mixer could come in handy to save you a little bit of that work. And also, oftentimes with cakes, I will stress how important it is to not overmix the batter. With this cake batter, you are more likely to accidentally undermix it, which could make your cake sink. It could make it more likely to fall apart. So make sure you are thoroughly mixing your batter here. We're looking for things to be uniform before we move on to the next step. All right, so we have a pretty stiff dough right now, but it is well combined. So now let's crack our eggs. Just crack them in a separate dish. We're going to be using 3 large eggs for today's recipe, and you want these to ideally be at room temperature. Really, all of your ingredients should be at room temperature, except for the very last ingredient that we'll be adding, which will be very hot. 1, 2, go. That was a little messy. And 3. We'll also be adding some flavoring. We are using 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract today. Now I opt not to add any mint flavoring into the actual cake batter because I found it to be a little bit overpowering. I prefer to have a nice rich chocolate cake and pair that with our mint frosting. I think that really gives you the best balance of flavor. All right, let's stir everything in until these are well combined. Again, it'll be easier for you if you use a mixer, but I'm just not gonna use a mixer today. All right, once we are uniform, we can move on to our next step, which is buttermilk. Love using buttermilk in cakes. It really gives you such a nice flavor, such a nice moisture. We are using 1 1/2 cups today. We'll stir this in. I'm going to start by just adding some of it, make it a little easier for me to combine things. Make sure you are scraping the sides and bottom of your bowl as you go because it's really easy for some of the batter to sort of hide on the bottom. It'll be thicker, and then what'll happen is your cake's not going to bake evenly. All right, let's add the rest. Okay, next ingredient, final ingredient for the cake layers anyway. You are going to need 3/4 cup of very, very hot, preferably boiling, at least steaming water. Now, if you would like, you can make this coffee, you can use coffee instead, use hot coffee, or you can add some instant coffee to your hot water. What coffee is going to do is it is going to increase the chocolate flavor of the cake without making the cake taste like actual coffee. So I'm going to add this instant coffee here now because I don't actually drink coffee. Stir that in. And we will add this to our cake batter. Don't splash yourself, it's hot. It is important to use a hot liquid, whether you're using just water or you're using coffee, because that's going to help bloom the cake batter, bloom the cocoa in the cake batter, and it's going to give us a nice rich flavor. I'm gonna do this in, I think, all of my chocolate cakes. And what you'll notice is most of my chocolate cakes are very, very similar. I have a base recipe that's very solid, my best ever chocolate cake, and I have adapted that into multiple other cakes. In my so unbiased opinion, they're all amazing. All right, remember we're looking for uniformity before we continue. Okay, let me grab my cake pans. All right, so you may have guessed with all the batter that we made that we are doing a 3-layer cake. I am using 8-inch pans. You could make the cake in 9-inch pans. It won't be quite as tall, but it's a pretty tall cake. It would probably be okay. If you only have 2 cake pans, you can bake your first 2 and let the batter sit on the counter and then, you know, remove your cake from the pan, let it cool a little bit, and then bake your 3rd layer. That will be fine with this cake. Now I have greased the sides and bottom of the pan lightly with butter. I have floured the pans. You could use a baking spray instead. Just if you flour it, make sure you shake out the excess flour. And I always, always, always line the bottoms of my pans with rounds of parchment paper. Just cut these out of my parchment paper. It is going to be your insurance that the cakes don't stick. All right, let's evenly divide all of this batter, it's a lot, into our cake pans. Now, if you use a scale, another bonus is you can easily just pop these on your scale and you'll weigh out 700 grams of batter per cake. Now, I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to eyeball it. Hopefully that works out okay for me. The problem when you don't evenly divide your cake batter is obviously you could have layers that are different sizes, and more concerning is your cake layers may not bake the same amount of time. So when you're checking them, make sure you check each cake individually, which you should really do anyway because not all ovens bake evenly throughout, so one space could be baking faster than the other. All right, now these cakes are going to go into the center rack of your 350-degree Fahrenheit preheated oven, and they're going to need to bake for about 35 to 38 minutes. Again, always use a toothpick to check that they are done. A toothpick inserted in the center of the cake should come out clean or with a few moist fudgy crumbs, but not wet batter. Now you are going to want to let the cakes cool in the pan for 15 minutes before you remove them. To remove them, take a knife, use it to loosen the pan from the sides, just in case it's stuck any. I just use a butter knife for this. And then you're going to carefully invert it onto a cooling rack. Pan might still be a little bit warm. Easiest way to do that, just place your cooling rack on top and flip it over. It should come out perfect every time. Now it's so important that you do not add your frosting until your cakes are cooled completely, otherwise they're going to fall apart. In fact, these are pretty soft cakes. One thing that I like to do is after the cakes have cooled completely, I'll pop them in the fridge or the freezer for 10, 15, maybe even 20 minutes before I begin working with them, just because it's going to make the icing application a lot easier. Now while they're in the fridge, you can start making your frosting. We're going to need a lot of frosting because we have a lot of cake to cover. We're going to start with 1.5 cups, which is usually 3 sticks, of softened unsalted butter. We'll drop this right in our large mixing bowl. And you will want to use either a stand mixer or an electric mixer for this part. Go ahead and drop that in. Before I start adding sugar, one thing I like to do is I will beat the butter until it's smooth and creamy. All right, once our butter's looking good, we'll start adding our sugar. You're going to need 6 cups of powdered sugar for this recipe. Now that's about 50% more than a standard buttercream, which ices a 2-layer cake. We're making a decadent 3-layer cake, so that's why we are using so much sugar and making so much icing today. This is a really decadent cake, guys. All right, now I am just going to add like a cup of the sugar to start. And then I'll continue to gradually add the powdered sugar with my mixer on low, increasing the speed once that's absorbed. Adding the sugar slowly is ideal so it doesn't end up all over you or all over your counter. And yet I still get it all over me and all over the counter. Today I'll have to show you guys my mixer trick, how I make it with the stand mixer. Add the sugar all at once. It's great. Try to add the rest all at once. It's a bit more than a cup there. All right, once you've added all that sugar, we can start adding our flavoring. So I talked about how the cake is just chocolate, the frosting is mint, and those two flavors pair really nicely together. So for the mint, you are going to want to use a peppermint extract, and you'll want to add 2 teaspoons of this. And I do recommend peppermint over mint extract. This has the more traditional mint flavor that you're used to. Think like a thin mint. Now I also do like to add a little bit of vanilla extract. It adds a nice depth of flavor. It mellows the mint a bit without dulling it or bullying it. So we just add a half teaspoon of vanilla extract. And we do want to use a little bit of salt. I'm going to add 1/4 teaspoon of table salt here. And also, if you want to add food coloring, you can start adding this now. There's nothing saying that a mint cake can't be white, but they're traditionally green. So I'm going to add a couple drops of mint green food coloring. Since I took the pictures with the green food coloring, I feel like I should show it with the green food coloring. Now I'm going to stir these in until everything's combined. And we're going to take a look at the consistency of the frosting. If it still seems super thick, that's not really a problem. What we're going to just do is we're going to add a little bit of cream to thin it. If you don't have cream, you could use milk instead. Just if you're using milk is thinner, you may need a little bit less. So I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of cream, a little less than 2 to start, and I'll add more as needed until I have a consistency that I feel is nice and easy to spread. The rest of that. Let's take a look. I think I want a little bit more cream in here. Let's add a bit more. Now, if you want to do a lot of decorating with this cake, like decorative swirls on top, you absolutely can, but you may find you need even more frosting. Also, you can make this with a ganache strip. I have a video on how to do a ganache strip. Lots of ways you can make this decadent cake even more decadent, but today I'm just going to be doing an even layer of frosting, and I'll be decorating with some mini chocolate chips for sort of that like mint chocolate chip ice cream feel. Slide this out of the way and start decorating our cakes. All right, now before we assemble our cakes, I mentioned I like to chill the cakes a little bit, just makes them easier to handle and makes frosting them a little bit neater. Don't refrigerate them too long, you'll end up drying out your cakes. This is just a very brief stint in the fridge. Now, another thing I like to do is level my cakes before I start assembling them. Just going to give you a nice, even cake. I prefer and recommend leveling the top of the cake. That's why I just flipped it over. And you can kind of see these cakes already bake pretty level, so you can skip this or do it whatever you prefer. Those of you who are more talented than I am can do this with just a kitchen knife, but I am not that skilled. My cakes end up worse when I do that, so I use a leveler. And I love this leveler. It was like $7 or $8 on Amazon. And these scraps are great snacking. All right, cake layer 1. We'll move it over to our platter, and I won't make you watch me level all of them. I think you get the idea. I mentioned doing chocolate chips on the outside of the cake. If you want to do a scattering of chocolate chips between the layers, that also would be a nice touch. Your call. Do my best to make a nice even layer. Now I'm going to do a thin crumb coat around the outside of the cake, which is just going to catch any crumbs, and then I'll pop it in the freezer for about 15 minutes. And when I pull it out, it'll be easy to ice it without getting crumbs or having crumbs all over your cake. I tell you, a crumb coating fixes all of your crumb issues. Just gives you such a beautiful, clean layer of frosting on the outside. All right, that's about as good as it gets with my decorating. So now, like I mentioned, I'm just going to add some chocolate chips up the sides, totally optional. Can't see what I'm doing over there, so hopefully it looks okay. Add a few on top. All right, that is how you make my mint chocolate cake. Let's go ahead and dig into this ridiculously decadent cake. Wipe off my knife between slices. I think this is my wonkiest cut yet. Don't think I did a straight cut down. We're gonna do a redo on that cut. This one's gonna be a little bit straighter. There we go. I really hope you can see on camera just how moist and decadent these layers are. I think you are going to love this cake if you're a mint chocolate fan, and if you try it, let me know what you think. I always love hearing from you. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. That is a good cake. That is the perfect balance of mint and chocolate, if you ask me. I'm mad at myself for not just grabbing the mixer. Now you do want to let these cakes, ooh. No, I was about to flip it. I picked it up and was about to flip it like this. Do you see the problem?